A country smaller than most cities, 500,000 people, a team that had tried and failed to reach a World Cup 7 times, and 90 minutes against the European champions, one of the favorites to win the whole thing. Everybody knew how this was supposed to go. Nobody told Cape Verde. On June 15th in Atlanta, Spain, second in the world, reigning European champions, walked out to face Cape Verde, a nation playing the first World Cup match in its entire history. Spain had everything. Cape Verde had a goalkeeper, a plan, and nothing to lose. 90 minutes later, the scoreboard read 0-0, the biggest shock of the World Cup so far. This is the story of how a chain of volcanic islands walked onto the biggest stage in sport and refused to lose, and why it was no accident. Start with what actually happened, because the scoreline doesn't begin to tell it. Spain did what Spain does. They took the ball and they kept it. They passed Cape Verde dizzy. By full time, they'd had 27 shots. 27! 7 on target. They missed 2 gilt-edged chances. On almost any other night, that's 3 or 4 goals. But in the way stood a man named Josimar Diaz, known to everyone simply as Vozinha, Cape Verde's veteran keeper, pushing 40 years old, the elder statesman of the squad. And tonight, he was unbeatable. 7 saves, several from point-blank range, the kind strikers score in their sleep. Every gap Spain found, Vozinha was already there. When the whistle blew, the Spanish players stood frozen. Their coach, Luis de la Fuente, said it in one line: "There are no small opponents here." Vozinha was named man of the match, and in the hours after, he reportedly gained 5 million followers. One game, 5 million. That's what shocking the world looks like in 2026. So who are these people? If you can't place Cape Verde on a map, you're not alone. It's a cluster of volcanic islands in the Atlantic, off the west coast of Africa, and it's tiny, around 525,000 people. That makes them one of the smallest nations ever to reach a World Cup. Their nickname is the Blue Sharks, and reaching this tournament wasn't a quick fairy tale. It was their 8th attempt. 7 times before they tried. 7 times they fell short. Here's the trick that makes it work. Cape Verde doesn't have the population to build a deep talent pool the normal way, so they built their team from their diaspora, the children and grandchildren of Cape Verdeans who emigrated across the globe. This squad is drawn from players based in 14 different countries, a national team assembled from a global family, pulled together by a former international known as Bubista, because qualifying was its own miracle. They were drawn against Cameroon, a 4-time World Cup nation, a giant of the continent. They started slowly, then they lost 4-1 in Cameroon, and the dream looked dead, and then they just refused to quit. A 4-match winning run flipped everything. They lost just once in 10 games, and in October, they beat Eswatini 3-0 to seal it. The islands shut down. People were given time off just to watch. 500,000 people stopping everything to witness history. Quick one before we get into how they actually pulled it off. If you're enjoying this, hit subscribe. It helps more than you'd think. And drop a comment. Can Cape Verde make it out of the group? Hold that thought, because it's more realistic than you'd expect. So how do you hold the European champions to 0? This wasn't luck, and it wasn't 11 men parking the bus and praying. Under Bubista, Cape Verde have a clear identity: defensive solidity, discipline, quick transitions. They sit in a compact, organized block and force you to beat 11 men who each know exactly their job. And these aren't amateurs. They're professionals schooled in European academies. This is a team with real pedigree. 3 Africa Cup of Nations quarterfinals. So when Spain came in wave after wave, Cape Verde didn't panic. They trusted their structure, and Vozinha did the rest. This wasn't a smash and grab. It was a plan, executed almost perfectly for 90+ minutes. And here's the bigger picture. Cape Verde's draw wasn't a freak. It was part of a pattern. The opening days of this World Cup have been brutal for the favorites. Spain dropped points. Brazil could only draw with Morocco. On one single day, every match ended level, the most ties in a day at a World Cup since 1958. The 48-team format was supposed to make life easier for the big nations. Instead, the so-called minnows are arriving organized, fearless, and impossible to break down. The gap is closing. As for Cape Verde, the job isn't done. They're in Group H with Uruguay and Saudi Arabia still to come. And in a 48-team World Cup, where the best third-place teams also advance, a single point against Spain might be the most valuable point of their whole tournament. A country of 500,000 people, a goalkeeper nearly 40, a team built from a global family the rest of the world had never heard of. They walked onto the biggest stage in sport, looked the European champions in the eye, and didn't blink. Whatever happens next, Cape Verde have already done something no one can take away, and if you wrote them off before kickoff, you won't make that mistake again.